I did not introduce myself yesterday, but so sorry about that.
That's okay.
Thank you for being here this week.
Well, glad to be here. Just good. Glad I'm here.
It's a good Synod. Try to have some fun.
Yes, you do. Yes.
Okay.
I've never heard that kind of malfunction before,
Well, yes, it just wouldn't appear.
but I have seen the numbers drop between the ballots. I mean, people leave.
Yeah.
But, I'm not my concern is that it's not coming through the wall and people are voting on one side. They're supposed to be in here. That's a good point.
If we could get Larry Olson and we can get a little traveling music for Dakota Road, and we need to come back and start working. If people would make their way back into the Celebrate Center. If we can invite people back into the Celebrate Center, we need to go back to work.
Does that go out into the...
It does, yes. And there's my favorite piano player, brought to you by Acme Piano Playing.
Welcome others back into our gathering space here by singing this echo when you're like this. Come, let us worship God. That's your line.
Come, let us worship God.
Come, let us worship God.
Come, let us worship God.
Welcome everyone
Help you, everyone,
to the love of
to the love of
God.
God.
Rest. Let's try that again. Come, let us worship God.
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 Welcome everyone
Welcome, everyone,
to the love of God.
to the love of God.
Now, I'll test out your Spanish. All you have to do is echo. Pan para nosotros. Try it. Pan para nosotros. Pan para nosotros. Pan para nosotros. Todos bienvenidos. Todos bienvenidos al amor de Dios. Al amor de Dios. Bread for the hungry. Bread for the hungry. Here's your line. Bread for the hungry. You sing. Welcome everyone.
Everyone
To the love of God.
to the love of God.
Rest for the weary. Rest for the weary. Rest for the weary. Rest for the weary. Come, welcome everyone. Welcome everyone to the love of God. 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 To the love of God.
To the love of God. Folks, we need to have you back in the room. We got to get back to work. I have a golf date later on this afternoon. And I don't even play golf. Folks in the gathering space, please return.
Finish your coffee.
Finish your coffee.
We have work to do.
Yeah.
Welcome everyone.
Welcome everyone
To the love of God. Okay, sing your brothers and sisters back in. Here we go. What a friend. What a friend we have in
Jesus. All our sins and griefs to bear. What a privilege to carry everything to God in prayer. Oh, what things we often forfeit. Oh, what needless pain we bear. All because we do not carry everything to God in prayer. So to continue on, we've had a request for a scientific survey of the favorite way to receive your fish. And so we're going to have a little test ballot here to find out your preferred consumption of fish, and this will be scientific. My favorite kind of fish lutefisk, fresh trout, sushi, salmon, fillet of fish. There should be a profound showing for number 1. Who's old enough in this room to remember when lutefisk came in a wooden barrel and it was brown when you took it out? Oh yeah, baby. The church smelt like that for about a month. It was a holy olfactory experience. All right, let's vote. Pick your favorite kind of fish. Please vote now. And you want to see a green light. If you don't see a green light flash, you didn't vote. All right, can you close the vote? And, oh. What? Come on, people. I mean, that's just embarrassing. And you call yourself Lutherans. Wow. Well, thanks for that scientific survey. You can all go home now.
I believe in the Holy Christian Church. My life has been spent with an expanding church. When I was a kid, church was West Niederose Lutheran Church, an open country church northwest of here. Then I came to Augustana, and my concept of church got bigger. Then I went to seminary. It got bigger again. Then I served in a couple of parishes, and it got bigger. And then when I was elected bishop, then I had the kind of experiences that I wished every member of the Synod would have. To see the kind of work that's being done inside the Synod, but also outside, literally all over the world. So I thought here, our minds now are really concentrated only on what's coming up. But maybe it would be all right for us to think a little bigger and beyond. So the congregation will respond to each petition with the words, "Hear our prayer." Everlasting and merciful God, we pray for your church. You have joined us together in one holy Catholic Church. Help us to learn what that means and to push out our horizons so we catch a glimpse of a church that's eternal, that is militant and triumphant. Lord, in your mercy, Lord of the church, we thank you for the ministries of congregations and of the special ministries of the South Dakota Synod. We thank you for leaders in our church, for Bishop Elizabeth and Bishop Dave, for our Synod staff, for all the pastors and lay leaders in this Synod. We thank you for the Holy Spirit who equips the church with such a wide variety of gifts. Lord, in your mercy. Almighty God, we commend to your gracious care and keeping all the men and women of our armed forces. Defend them daily with your heavenly grace and strengthen them as they face the perils and temptations that surround them. Give to those whom we have entrusted with authority the spirit of wisdom, that there might be peace and justice in our world. Lord, in your mercy. Creator God, you have placed us in an interdependent world where the work and gifts of farmers and ranchers and middlemen provide food from all over the world. We thank you for all those persons you use to answer our prayer, give us this day our daily bread. In your mercy, grant favorable weather to all. Lord, in your mercy. God of compassion, help us to see the face of Christ in those who are in need. We call to mind those who are homeless, destitute, sick, isolated, victims of war, and all those who have no one to care for them. We're especially mindful of those who are suffering from harsh weather, from flooding and wind, and those whom we name in our minds and hearts. Lord, in your mercy. Lord of nations, we pray for our brothers and sisters in our companion synods, Cameroon and Nicaragua, and our missionaries in all parts of the world. Fill your church with a fresh wind and a fresh fire, that we might be totally devoted to you and empowered through your word to meet each task with energy and faith. Unto you, O God, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, be all honor and all glory in your holy church. Amen.
Prior to the fourth ballot for a Synod bishop, the three persons plus ties who receive the greatest number of votes on the third ballot will be invited to participate in a question and answer period. The period shall be moderated by the designated presider for the election process, and that is me. The same 5 questions shall be asked of each of the nominees. Only one nominee will be in the assembly room at a time. The order that the nominees shall appear on stage to answer the questions shall be determined by the draw of name. Each nominee will have a maximum of 2 minutes to respond to each question. A timekeeper will indicate to the speaker when 30 seconds remain of the allotted time and when the allotted time has ended. The time for question and answer period shall be a maximum of 45 minutes. There shall be no applause before, during, or after each answer. Do I need to repeat that? So, I believe we're ready to begin. The first candidate will be Bill Tesh. I'm answering questions. You're at the podium. Question number 1. Describe a defining moment in your call to ministry. You have 2 minutes.
Well, there were many moments along the way. there was, and I don't often put a lot of stock in those kind of supernatural experiences. I know because I'm like sort of a natural skeptic, right? But way back in college, when I had come through kind of a journey, a spiritual journey of discernment, had changed majors, though, I don't know, maybe 37 times by that point. And I woke up one morning with an idea in my head. I could be a pastor. I had been starting to get engaged with Lutheran campus ministry in Madison, Wisconsin, where I was at school. And it just, it sort of came out of nowhere. And then I didn't tell anybody about it. I thought, no, I'm not ready to go. I'm not ready to out myself on that issue quite yet. So I dwelt with that for a few days. And then that Sunday, I happened to be in church at Lutheran Memorial. Anybody here know Madison, Wisconsin? And I was at Lutheran Memorial right there on campus. And it's a cavernous cathedral-like space. And I was sitting toward the back, kind of trying to be incognito. And I was participating in worship, Green Book. And as the service was coming to an end, I went to leave, and there was a woman, elderly woman, sitting behind me. And she touched my sleeve as I left, and she said, "Excuse me, are you thinking about going into the ministry?" And I said, "No," kind of ran out of there. But I do think maybe God had sent an angel for that moment in that human person to reach out and touch my sleeve. So,
Question number 2. Describe some of the leadership positions that you have held in the past and how you made a difference in those positions.
Okay. Well, the current leadership position that I hold is as Director for Evangelical Mission here in South Dakota. So what that means is that depending on how much grant money a particular ministry has, there's some level of accountability to me. So for our mission developers starting new congregations, that means that I'm their direct supervisor. For other congregations that have some renewal money of some kind, the level of accountability varies based on how much money they have. That's how we structure it in our church-wide organization. And what I know about people in ministry is they need to be able to create. They need room to be creative, to let their imaginations run. And if you try to micromanage that, or if you try to even lean into their world with your own vision at all, it just doesn't work. And so it really is about coaching, about helping people understand what their authentic gifts are, helping them identify those challenges that they are facing and the opportunities they have and how they can leverage their authentic God-given gifts to meet those challenges. And I've loved that work because it's beautiful to see people thrive when they have that kind of coaching and support. Another recent call I had, my last and final military deployment was back in 2017. I was the senior chaplain at the largest strategic Air Force base in an undisclosed location in Southwest Asia. And I had an interesting staff, I'll just put it that way. And it was the most bizarre combination of characters you could possibly have. And I've led a lot of different teams, but this one was a challenge. But I was proud when we came to the end of our time, and I met weekly with the general, and I said, "Sir, we had some challenges on this deployment." And he just said, "Well, Chaplain, it didn't show at all."
Question number 3. As you look at the difficult issues facing this Synod and this church, how will you provide leadership to help address them?
So one of the difficulties I think facing this church is something that I alluded to in my opening remarks, which is this reality that we've been living in for over 40 years of the decline of membership in our church, in the whole church in North America. And I believe, because I've seen it work, that the way to address that is really to have a cultural shift It's really about a spiritual transformation. St. Paul said, be transformed by the renewal of your mind. And I think the renewal we need is to understand that this is not our failure. This is something God is doing. And that the focus we need is to be focused on how do we become those communities that are all about loving Jesus and loving our neighbor. I know that sounds simple, but so does seek ye first the kingdom of God and all these things will be added. Do we believe that? And I think what kind of leadership that we can provide as a synod is, first of all, to foster that cultural shift in the preaching and in the teaching, but also in how we resource congregations, to come alongside them in such a way that encourages them to do two things: deepen faith practices and reroot in community. That's kind of a fancy way of saying, love Jesus, love our neighbor, but it maybe describes it better. What if we use the ancient gifts of the church that we've had for centuries, that we know are a gift to us, to grow in our daily love of Christ, and then also worked hard as congregations at rerouting in our communities, reconnecting with neighbors that we maybe have gotten disconnected from, or with new neighbors that have moved in that maybe look a little different than us? It's amazing what happens when I'm growing in my faith and I'm sensing a deeper trust and love for Jesus Christ, and I'm getting alongside of new neighbors. It's amazing what God can do.
Question number 4. This synod has many small and rural congregations, and there is a shortage of clergy who are available to serve in these congregations. How would you address this issue, and do you plan to continue to support the Kairos program as a part of your solution to this problem?
Is that 2 questions or 1? All right, so I'll take the first one, the last part of that question first. Yes, I would continue the appropriate development of the Kairos program. It's incredibly innovative. What Chris and Sarah and Bishop Zelmer and the folks at Augie and Sioux Falls Seminary have done they're to be commended for the creative nature of that program. It can be improved, and I think it should be. There needs to be more diversity, especially from the Lutheran perspective. We will benefit as theologians when we understand that there's a diversity of thought, even among Lutherans who are firmly within the circle of our Lutheran expression of the gospel. So I would advocate for there to be more diversity there. With small member congregations, and I think rural and urban congregations have something in common when they're small member congregations. They have a lot of the same challenges. We've been doing a lot of work here already in South Dakota. We recently hosted and spearheaded Hope in the Heartland, which was a gathering of over 110 congregations and 8 synods, 30 congregations right here in South Dakota. Those congregations came together for a day of renewal training, and then we made sure they had a coach. So as far as we're sort of the test case in South Dakota that God probably isn't calling a preacher for every pulpit, right? And so what do we do about that? I really think that we're moving towards, we can go back into our history, right? We can look in our New Testament and go to that New Testament concept of the overseer or bishop, which would be a person that was overseeing someone like a deacon, but a word and sacrament deacon in New Testament language, that was serving several other congregations. So that might be a synodically authorized minister in our polity. So where are...
Question number 5. The strategic directions of the ELCA include a commitment to be a public church. What does this mean to you, and how would your leadership reflect this commitment?
It's a really important question, so I want to thank you for it. One of the things that I'm really committed to is that our faith should be evident in the world. You'll see in my bio, I worked hard over years to start a new organization here in South Dakota called South Dakota Faith and Public Life. which is an interfaith gathering of faith leaders that come together so that religion can become a unifying voice around issues in our society. I think modeling civility out in the public sphere, addressing divisions by the way we behave in public is helpful. I think what Bishop Zellmer has been doing, I would love to grow that. The Interfaith Day, I think, is a great start. But there's so much that we can do to partner with interfaith partners and with people who sometimes experience oppression, marginalization in our society. But probably the most important thing that a bishop can do, I've been advocating and arguing for years that we need to get marginalized voices to the table. A bishop doesn't have to advocate or argue. They can just make place at the table. And it's absolutely essential that we do that. That we make space at the table for voices that have been marginalized. Because, and this isn't primarily about justice, though it is that. It's primarily about we need the wisdom of people who have spent their lives on the margins, because that's where we're headed as a church, right? This is adaptive leadership is what that's about, is listening to those marginalized voices. So I think what a bishop can do is get those marginalized voices to the table and then help us all be quiet while we listen and learn from the wisdom that we can hear from that source. Thank you.
Our next candidate is Costanza Hagemeyer. Question number 1. Describe a defining moment in your call to ministry. You have 2 minutes.
I sat at my seminary in Germany and was confronted with the truth that the German church would not have a place for us, that there was no sense of call. And I know it might sound spooky to you, but I know Jesus was right there. And he says, there is a place for you in this church. And I walked out of that room where 7 grown-up professors sat, and I knew there was a place. And I found home, and I found a place right here in the midst of the people of South Dakota on the prairie. That was a defining moment in a seminary in Germany where there was no room in the inn, and you have made room. Thank you.
Question number 2. Describe some of the leadership positions that you have held in the past and how you made a difference in those positions.
All of the leadership positions that I have served in were not initiated to serve myself but my neighbor. And it fills me actually with great joy that as I look back on all those calls, all those community projects are still in place. The first backpack program in Parkston, the community food bank in Parkston. We're working on a task force in Madison currently for at-risk middle school youth. Those are projects, those are places. I have started the backpack program through the grace and the help of other people who did the groundwork in Madison. At the same time, ministry and missions do not exist for our own sake, but for the sake of our neighbor. And anytime I leave a place, I leave it without wanting this about me, but about my neighbor. Because those kids need to be fed, whether they know my name or not know my name, but they need to be fed. And so lots of those mission projects that I just named to you are still in place. Go talk to the people. They sit right here in your midst.
Question number 3. As you look at the difficult issues facing this Synod and this church, how will you provide leadership to help address them?
Well, I told somebody out there, if you don't remember me for anything but the lady who said she's going to show up, I'll show up. So that's all you remember. I think, can you repeat that one more time, please? The
Want the question
question?
again?
Can you repeat the question one more
Yes,
time?
as you look at the difficult issues facing
Oh,
the...
I got it. All right. It's all in the waters of baptisms, my friend. The difficult issue I cannot fix, okay? I can't fix it. But we can show up together. And that will be difficult. It's going to be hard work. To die in the waters of baptism is hard. Somebody had understood that I don't love God first. I love God first. I showed up here as an immigrant. I love God. I have a mother that struggles with Alzheimer's, and I have a mother-in-law that struggles with MS. I'm here. I love God. But I need you to show up and love God the same way. And we are broken people in a broken world, but we are raised to our feet through the waters of baptism. We know whose we are. I don't know why we are so afraid to fall. We can't fall any deeper than into the loving arms of God. So I can't fix the problems. Besides, I don't know what your problems are, right? Because I can go from one congregation to another, and you have other issues you face. I know there are big issues, such as finances and membership. I know all of those. But are those really our issues? Are those really our issues? Or are they just comfortable issues for us to face the real issues?
Question number 4. This synod has many small and rural congregations, and there is a shortage of clergy who are available to serve in these congregations. How would you address this issue, and do you plan to continue to support the Kairos program as a part of your solution to this problem?
I am the hybrid of Kairos, right here. Why? Because I came with a full 8 years of seminary education and master's in divinity degree. Bishop Andrea and her staff at that time didn't really know what to do with us. Well, we kind of came and they said you could really come, and here we are. And we worked with, we did. So we worked with Lutheran Seminary and we were affiliated. The same process. When I hear Bishop Dave and the people from Kairos, Steve Paulson, Chris Krogan, and Sarah speak about Kairos, I am the epitome of Kairos. It's standing right in front of you. I have not done any harm. Well, maybe to my... I have done lots of great harm. But I also are loved by a loving God. So I have served 4 rural congregations. I know that when we showed up, they bought the cats in the sack. They bought into us and they said, yes, we'll go with you on this journey. And we did our internship in 1 year. We went through all of the process. We had a Lutheran Seminary affiliation. Kairos is essential to filling pulpits. I know of a neighboring congregation right now in my neighborhood where a free Lutheran congregation had no troubles of sending someone down. They come out of the same town I come. If we really are only about whether I love my seminary, or I love my seminary, trust me, Heidelberg was a great university. But we are needing to take care of our neighbor. We are needing to be with each other, not against each other, for the sake of the good news that we have to offer. Whether you hold your MDiv from Kairos or Heidelberg Seminary, Luther Seminary, Wartburg, and I know I'm missing us.
Question number 5. The strategic directions of the ELCA include a commitment to be a public church. What does this mean to you, and how would your leadership reflect this commitment?
Well, I am already public right here. The church, as I said, exists as a public entity. We do not, and I said that before, exist for our own sake. But we're also not a social organization. Every call I have accepted, I said I will not join any of your service clubs. And I am a diehard Rotarian, trust me. I just haven't joined them. But what I will always do is I will remind the congregations that we exist as a public entity. We cannot wait until people show up for us in our church walls, but we need to show up where they are. We need to show up, whether they are in South Dakota or around the world. Strategically, I will listen to where you want to show up as a public church. I told you, I'm not coming here with a great fix-it program, because only we together can be public church.
Thank you.
Oh, very good. Thank you.
Our next candidate is Heidi Benstock. Question number 1. Describe a defining moment in your call to ministry. 2 minutes.
A defining moment in my call to ministry.
Defining moment in your call to ministry.
I think I have mentioned that I've been shaped by the Lutheran Church, and certainly discovering that I have a passion for telling people their sins are forgiven happened when I worked at camp. And so I think that shaped me throughout, but I can look back on my whole life and look at points where I was shaped. I mean, certainly in my home congregation that defined me, going to Augustana, working at camp, a family who brought me to church every week. All of these things were defining moments in my ministry. I was able to spend 10 years here in this congregation, or almost 10 years. I think there were many defining moments as you enter into ministry and begin to walk with people and preach at funerals and preach at weddings and baptize. With experience, you start to see that this gospel thing actually does something, and that it brings comfort, and it brings peace, and it does that which it says that it will do. And all those have been defining moments in my ministry, and continue to be so. I continue to be surprised when faith matters, because like you, I am a regular person who sometimes wonders. But God continues to show up and enter into my life and grab me and both put me in my place and then lift me up by telling me who I am. And so I have heard that through the church, and I also get to proclaim it, and all those things have worked to shape me in my ministry.
Question number 2. Describe some of the leadership positions that you have held in the past and how you made a difference in those positions.
Most recently, I had just finished serving as the Dean of the Crossroads Conference, and so I was able to sit on support to ministries, and that has been very much a learning role and a gift to be able to see congregations in transition, and to be able to be in the conversation about who will go to the congregations where there is an opening and what pastors are feeling the call to move. And so that has been a gift to be on that committee and be witness to how the church works in that way behind the scenes, so that congregations can have leaders to fulfill those roles. I think that I have served well there, and the gift of that too on that committee, not only to be a voice on that committee, is that as Dean of Conference I get to, it gave me an excuse to show up at events and be intentional about that and get to know my fellow colleagues and to hear their stories and to know that they are in this with me in proclaiming the gospel. I think my presence is one of listening and hearing and attending to relationships and celebrating when people are celebrating and listening when they are challenged and sitting with them in that. Other leadership roles, I've been able to be in the community on different boards. I sat on the Community Outreach Board for several years, which is an organization in town that gives people a hand up and assistance, and so able to be a voice on that, representing a church and that faith perspective on that board. I have coached with Girls on the Run and been able to be a voice to elementary girls and encourage them in their life, and so I've had leadership roles both in and outside the church, all of which have been collaborative and a team approach and listening and making decisions together.
Question number 3, as you look at the difficult issues facing this synod and this church, how will you provide leadership to help address them?
I think one of the things that we have heard through the survey, and as people talk about the challenges facing the church, we hear a lot about declining membership and a shortage of leaders. And I think already our synod has shown that we think creatively about these things together, and that's never just one person, it's all of us together thinking about it. We certainly have seen it through the Kairos program and the many students that are placed in congregations and learning and doing all at the same time. We have seen it certainly with our seminaries, making other distance learning possible and supporting through that way. So it feels like we are engaging already in a process that helps us to find leaders. And I think there are opportunities for partnership and looking at our resources and how do we share those and how do we lean into the places where we have resources and share those where the places where the resources seem scarce. My approach to solving problems is getting smart people around the table, and I think we have a lot of smart people, and collaborating. I certainly don't think of myself as a person with all the answers and would look to people who know something to sit around the table with me, to think together and to engage in a process of problem solving. Certainly that would be people who are in it, in the thick of it, but maybe some outside voices too who can give a new perspective to the issues. And so my approach is always one of teamwork. I appreciate the gifts and skills that others bring to the table. I trust them. I don't seek to micromanage and simply let those voices come up and creatively come up with a solution and a problem-solving process.
Question number 4. This synod has many small and rural congregations, and there is a shortage of clergy who are available to serve in these congregations. How would you address this issue, and do you plan to continue to support the Kairos program as a part of your solution to this problem?
So maybe it feels like I've already answered that question. Clearly I have a value for what Kairos is doing, and the students that I've interacted with and those who have gone through that system are well educated and are clearly proclaiming the gospel in my own experience of them, and so it feels like we have a creative solution in part. I mean, nothing ever solves it completely, and so we do have something at work that's already putting students in places where they can serve, and that seems like a good thing. It seems something that we can build on and make sure continues. But certainly there might be other creative things that we can do, such as partnerships between churches. We have models for engaging across denomination and working in small towns where churches can come together and partner, whether it's both for a pastor or for programming. It seems like there's lots of opportunities to partner. As we focus on mission, if we know what our mission is, that our value is simply to proclaim the gospel, then our egos get to fall away and we can partner and not worry about who has more and who has less, but we can simply partner and make sure that the gospel is being proclaimed in all the places that it needs to be proclaimed. Certainly there continues to be need to think about and find leaders. So how are we identifying those people in our midst? How are we inviting people into ministry? It's a challenge to do so, and it takes getting to know one another to do that. How that happens, I think, is organic, and yet it's a conversation if we intentionally go about it together. It seems like we can do that and lean on the gifts that we have in one another and for one another. And again, when we are focused on the why of what we are about, when we have a mission in front of us, it feels like a lot of those complicated details can fall away, and we can focus on that one thing and do that together.
Thank you.
That's it. Oh, great.
Oh, wait a minute. One more. Sorry.
Teaser.
The strategic directions of the ELCA include a commitment to be a public church. What does this mean to you, and how would your leadership reflect this commitment?
Okay. To be a public church. I mean, it seems by nature we are public. Our doors are always open, and what we do is out there for anyone to see. I think there are ways that we can put this out into the world better, and there's lots of ways that, for example, in my current context that we do this. We have ministry online, and we engage folks on Facebook and through our media ministries, but there are ways that we can be public more so than we do just by our gatherings on Sunday mornings or our Bible studies or our Wednesday night activities. And that maybe also means that we are more comfortable with our faith and saying who we are out in the world, and figuring out together how we are public people together. Certainly for the office of bishop, it means speaking when you need to speak, when something is happening and a word needs to be brought out into the world. So I understand that the office of bishop speaks publicly on behalf of the church, and that's something we do carefully and with thought and consideration. Otherwise, to be public just seems to be what we do naturally, certainly by our nature and in what we do whenever we gather as God's people. We don't hide who we are, we simply are who we are in the world, and we claim that and confess it. For God has claimed us to be the people of God in the world. Jesus names us so. It's not something we choose or accomplish or decide. It is who we are, named so by Christ.
That was the last question.
Are you sure? Okay.
I apologize for that.
That's all right.
Our schedule now allows for 8 minutes of prayer, reflection, and informal discussion. We will then call for the credentials report and then move into voting on the fourth ballot. All right. At this time, I'm going to call Mara Stilson to come forward and give us the credentials report.
The credentials report for June 1st at 11:30 a.m. Clergy voting members 144, lay female voting member 234, lay male voting members 159, total lay voting members 393, total voting members 537.
Thank you, Mara. You have now heard from 3 final nominees. You are now experts in S 9.04 and your election process. It's time for the 4th ballot for Bishop of the South Dakota Synod. On the 4th ballot, 60% of the legal votes cast are necessary for election. Again, this ballot will be by voting machine. As was the case with the 3rd ballot, when instructed, please cast your vote according to the key. If you press the incorrect key, simply press the correct one, and your vote will be changed. I will indicate when the voting is closed. If you have a problem with your machine, please raise your hand. After a short delay, the results will be displayed. So at this time, let us ask Bishop Norman Eichmann to help bring us focus and ask the Holy Spirit to be with us. Bishop Eichmann.
As we pray, Lord, as we consider, as we weigh, keep our minds open in this process of discernment. We thank you for each candidate who has participated in our discernment. Without them, we would not have seen your will at work among us. We have learned as we have listened. And as we take this vote, unify our hearts. For whichever candidate we choose, we agree on one thing: that Christ is risen again, that we are witnesses to the hope of your resurrection in the world. So we seek unity through this vote and trust that you have worked your will through our discernment. Amen.
Just as a reminder, everyone in here should be eligible to vote. If you're not, please leave immediately. Are you ready to proceed with the vote? Please vote now. There's a hand. Where's the other hand? There's in this section, looks like 2 or 3 in this section. They're having trouble with their machine. Keep your hand up so we'll know. There's someone right there. So this side of the room is fine, right? Okay, so we're really just talking about here and here. The people that had difficulty seems to continue to have some difficulty. So just give us a few minutes. I think there are only a couple. Oh, there's another hand right here. Keep your hand up, please, so we know where you are. There she is. Okay, well, at least we have one person who has not been able to vote yet. There's another hand waving. Could you raise your hand again so we'll know where you are? Oh, now we're over here. Oh, on this section. Sawyer looks like she's in the back on the left side. Remember, the Spirit is still with us. Lon, looks like we have one issue over here. That's the only one I'm aware of. Is everyone else in good shape? I think we're getting her another device. Is there anyone who has not voted? All right, I declare the fourth ballot for the election of the Bishop of the South Dakota Synod closed.
Hallelujah. Try that line. Hallelujah. 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 How good it is to live in peace, no longer strangers, swords beat into plows. We'll open the soil to grow with our neighbors. Hallelujah. 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 Will we live in fear that there's not enough and race to get more? Free us to give. There's generous life behind every locked door. Hallelujah. 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 We celebrate love that spreads out a feast right on a mountain. Here hungry are fed, there's refuge from harm, and all are made welcome. Hallelujah. 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 Hallelujah.
Thank you. Let us see the election results. There is no election. No one having received 60% of the legal votes cast. And we will proceed to a fifth ballot at 2:06 p.m. this afternoon. I return the chair to Bishop Zellman.
Thank you, Mr. Horn. I appreciate that. I would invite our treasurer, Mr. Gilbertson, to please come forward. And we will be taking questions and comment and moving to the adoption of the mission plan for 2020.
Do we have the clicker today? Or we don't? I'm getting the one second finger from Sawyer, so thank you. No, I thank you for letting me return. I understand my role to be that I come to suck the humor out of the assembly here and delivering the numbers. So there you go. Oh, thank you. Now you've made the accountant blush. That takes a lot to do that. frankly, relating to, I didn't get any questions, so you're all very fantastic learners from yesterday. Very specific to the budget. I did on a few occasions get questions about my professional background. Thank you very much. And in brief, I'm a CPA. For the last 3 years, I've worked for a public trust company, and then the preceding 10 years, I worked for a public accounting company. That would be the only question I got. So yeah, how'd I do on that one? Well, thank you. Oh. Well, now, that, according to Bishop Norm, that might be boasting, you know. But I don't know. I think. Oh, well, that's great. You can share that if you'd like. I'll give you one last photo op here. If you didn't get a picture of this yesterday, what I did not do, and what Mom and Dad always taught me, there's never a bad time to say thank you. Second bullet point, please take back a thank you to all your congregations and the support that they're providing. The year that we're in right now, it is right on budget. There would be any number of things that have happened this year in the economy, whether you're a crop producer or just the increased volatility in the stock market, which could be justified in not sending that support in. But please hear a thank you. Thank you for continuing to send in the support that was pledged. Alrighty. The only other thing to highlight, I would say, on the proposed mission plan, it's proposed to be a balanced budget. And again, we're looking to keep those allocations to the respective areas, the cents on every dollar. We're looking to make that consistent going into the next year. And I think the bishop would back me up on this. The message to send back for that 1% increase, I think that'd be a great gift that you could offer up to your next bishop if your congregations are able to do that and make the financial piece one less drip from the water hose that the bishop gets to drink from during their first year of being bishop. So, would there be any other questions at this time from the floor? Seeing none, I understand I have to turn it back over to you now for the formalities, so. I know. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Gilbertson. It has been a privilege to work with you, and I would echo his words of thanks both for the current year that we're in, for last year as we finished up. I have deep appreciation for the year that we're living in, and we are I cannot tell you how much it means to see the mission support come in on track, and particularly as we move to transition, anticipating a new bishop. I know it can be tempting to think in those meetings, oh, they won't notice. You know, we didn't like the last guy that much anyway, and you know, the new person, that they won't notice. Well, they will notice. And I hope and pray that you continue the fine support that we have provided all the ministries of the church through your gifts might continue. I would entertain a motion then to adopt the 2020 mission plan. Is there a second? Is there further discussion? Seeing no one moving to the mic, all those in favor of the 2020 mission plan as presented, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? It is adopted. We move then to the 2020 compensation and guidelines conversation. That is for our rostered leaders, both deacons and pastors, and also for our guidelines for lay professionals and then support staff for those churches that have that. At this time, I would invite Scott Parsley, who is the chair of the Support to Ministries Committee, to present the proposal.
Thank you, Bishop. Before I start the short presentation I have, I would like to just thank all those who kept their names active for being our new bishop. It's not a small thing to put yourself in that kind of a position, and I really do appreciate it. I do have one small piece of advice for whoever gets elected bishop. My sister gave this to me a long time ago, and it served me well. And it's, don't believe everything you think. So moving right along with the very brief report that I have, I would like to thank Pastor Eric Lehman and Ione Klinger for the work they did. The Prairie Rivers Conference was the one that reviewed the compensation package this year. We do that. We pass that to the different conferences to give them an opportunity to see what goes into the compensation package. They had a small committee that worked on it. After reviewing the compensation currently and looking at the economic situations in the state, they have recommended, and back to the support to ministries, and we recommend to you, the body today, that we look at a 2% increase in the compensation package. That is reflected in your resolution that I will have the bishop, I believe I turn it back over to you for action. But before I do that, I have the mic, so I'm going to stand here for a second. And I'm going to thank the bishop for all the work that he has done. We've had an interesting friendship, social as well as professional, for the last 12 years. And he's one of my hunting buddies, and I'm going to cherish that as we move forward. We're going to continue those things. So thank you for all the work you've done in the church.
Resolution number 1, 2020 Compensation and Guidelines for Rostered Ministers and Lay Staff. Resolved that the 2020 Compensation and Guidelines for Rostered Ministers and Lay Staff, prepared by a task force for the Committee for Support to Ministries and recommended by the Committee for Adoption, be adopted as the policy of the South Dakota Synod by the 2019 South Dakota Synod Assembly. Recommendation of due pass.
All right, it is resolution number 1 is before you. It does not need a motion or a second. Is there any discussion on resolution number 1? Just as a brief moment of history, about every 4 years, Support to Ministry does a deep dive on the documents where we kind of pull them apart and spend actually a considerable amount of time taking them apart, having conversation with people across the state. And in the interim, it is a far more simple process where each conference gets their turn, where we have conversation within those communities. This particular one was, this year was Prairie Rivers. And what's the economy look like? What's happening in your communities? What kind of pay raises are being proposed both in your school systems and out in the business community? And that's how they make that determination. So it doesn't just come from me or from Carla over here. So there's actually some thought that goes into it. All right, any other comments? If not, all those in favor of the compensation guidelines, resolution number 1, signify by saying aye. Opposed? It is carried. At this time, if we could have resolution number 3 and if needed, number 4, and I'll explain as we move along.
Resolution number 3, election of the Board of Directors of Lutheran Social Services of South Dakota. Whereas Lutheran Social Services of South Dakota is an affiliated social ministry organization of the Evangelical Lutheran Church in America, and Lutheran Social Services Articles of Incorporation provide that LSS shall be governed by a board of directors with majority representation from the South Dakota Synod of the Evangelical Lutheran Church in America. There is a discrepancy between the current language of the South Dakota Synod Bylaws and the current practice outlined in LSS Bylaws that has been in practice since 2006. Be it resolved to amend S 9.01.11 of the Bylaws of the South Dakota Synod by striking, "The Synod shall elect persons to serve on the Board of Directors of Lutheran Social Services of South Dakota as follows. Each conference elect the layperson. The South Dakota Synod Assembly elect 2 laypersons and 4 rostered ministers." And inserting, "The Synod Council shall elect 3 rostered ministers to serve on the Board of Directors of Lutheran Social Services of South Dakota."
Thank you. I need to ask for a point of personal privilege, and that would be to allow Betty Oldenkamp, the president of Lutheran Social Service, to come to microphone 1 and to speak to you about this resolution. Are you in favor of granting me that privilege? If so, answer by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Betty, microphone 1.
All right, it's over there. All right. The resolution that is before you comes through the current Board of Directors for Lutheran Social Services. We are looking to take the responsibility of recruiting additional board members and putting that upon the Board Governance Committee of the LSS Board. So it would take that workload off each of your conferences in terms of identifying those potential members. What would remain is within the bylaws for Lutheran Social Services is a requirement that 60% of the board members are ELCA members, are members of an ELCA congregation, and the Bishop of the South Dakota Synod serves as a continuous member of our board. So we believe that this change will hold true to our Lutheran heritage and will also provide for us the connection to congregations across the state that we greatly value by making sure that we have clergy representation. I would answer questions if there are any, or stand aside while you proceed.
Okay, thank you very much, Betty. Are there questions, or is there speaking for or against the resolution? I was certain you were going to the microphone. I was kind of excited about the whole thing. Make sure you don't want to go to the microphone. Oh, microphone 2.
I have a question. What about the lay members? Are there any lay members that are, you know, you're striking a section that addresses the lay members of the committee?
I'm going to let Betty answer that question if that's okay. Microphone 1.
So in regard to lay members, we currently have the bishop and 3 clergy, so the remaining members would be lay members.
How many members are there on the board?
We have a minimum of 16 and a maximum of 25.
Okay, so there's
It's a large group.
fair representation of the lay.
Yes, there is,
Okay.
and there's also geographic and gender and ethnic representation.
Thank you, Betty. Thank you for microphone 2. Anyone else moving to the mic? Do you understand what you're doing? Striking the one and inserting the other, that Synod Council would be responsible for putting people, rostered leaders, on the LSS board. All right? All those in favor of resolution number 3 signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? It is adopted. Resolution number 4, then, because you have adopted number 3, is coming to you with no, just coming to you, period. And with nothing, right? So I'm going to recommend that we just let it die a lonely death, and that it would actually happen. We have it there because we didn't know what you were going to do with 3. So we still needed rostered leaders on the board. If you didn't pass 3, we needed to elect people. So at the Synod Council meeting, if you ignore 4, we'll have to elect those people. So those same people will go to that meeting, and then that will become the process as we move forward. Are you okay with that? Yeah, I love you. All right, resolution number 6. Pastor Craig.
Subject, a proposal to amend the South Dakota Synod Constitution, the bylaws of it to increase the involvement of retired rostered ministers, brought from the Southeastern Conference. Whereas there are currently 122 retired rostered ministers in the South Dakota Synod, and retired rostered ministers have a wealth of experience and love of the church that would be valuable to deliberations and decisions made by the South Dakota Synod meeting in assembly, and at present, retired rostered ministers are not afforded voice or vote at Synod assembly unless they are elected as voting members by a congregation, and retired ministers serve the Synod in part-time and interim capacities and in various other ways and have a vested interest in the deliberations and decisions made at Synod assembly. And several synods across the ELCA have adopted provisions allowing for representation by retired rostered ministers at Synod assembly. And Section 722 of the Constitution of the South Dakota Synod states, "The Synod may establish processes that permit retired rostered ministers to those designated as disabled or on leave from call on the roster of the Synod to serve as voting members of the Synod assembly, consistent with Section 721C. And 721C currently does not exist in the Constitution of the South Dakota Synod. Therefore, be it resolved to amend the bylaws of the Constitution of the South Dakota Synod by adding Section 721C, which states, all retired rostered leaders on the roster of this Synod shall caucus prior to the first business session and elect up to 10% of their number of the roster in this Synod to be voting members of the Synod Assembly. All others shall be advisory members with voice but not vote. Ministers of Word and Sacrament elected to be voting members under this section shall be counted as ministers of Word and Sacrament, members of the Synod Assembly, and not as lay persons for purposes of Section 721. All other roster leaders elected to be voting members under this section shall be counted as lay members of the Synod Assembly. Recommendation, no recommendation.
So you might have noticed we were conferring. So there's some mistakes in 6. My understanding is that in the guidebook there is a 6A, because 6 is coming to you with no recommendation. If someone went to the microphone and recommended moving 6A, we could deal with the one that has been corrected. Is there a second? Was that to take up 6A? All right, then we need to move to that in your guidebook, and I don't know that you have that in print, do you? Well, that's just lovely. Can we display 6A? Okay, are you okay with me reading it, or would you let? Come on, Pastor Craig, earn your money. Just read it. Okay, be it resolved.
Reading the be it resolved to amend the bylaws of the South Dakota Synod by adding Section 2201. All retired roster leaders on the roster of the Synod shall caucus prior to the first business session and elect up to 10% of their number on the roster of the Synod to be voting members of the Synod Assembly. All others shall be advisory members with voice but not vote. Ministers of Word and Sacrament elected to be voting members under this section shall be counted as ministers of Word and Sacrament members of the Synod Assembly and not as lay persons. For purposes of Section 721, all other rostered leaders elected to be voting members under this section shall be counted as lay members of the Synod Assembly. So we are amending the bylaws, not the Constitution as a whole. S 722.01. Do as I'm told.
Are you thoroughly confused now? Our job is done here. So the issue was 6A was wrong on a couple of points. One, there is a 721 already existing in our Constitution bylaws for the Synod. Secondly, retired clergy have had voice. They have not had vote at the Synod Assembly. The only way they had a vote is if they were doing an interim call or if they were elected by their congregation as a lay voting member to represent them. But then they came as a lay person, not as a retired pastor. That's the current practice right now. What is being proposed is that they would need to get together at some point in time before Synod Assembly. They would have to choose who would represent them from within their own community, and they would come to us as pastors, AKA they would count against the 60-40%. Because right now, our Constitution requires that 60% of the voting members that come to this event are lay people. 40% are supposed to be pastors. Now, one of the issues I'm just going to shut up about that. That's going to be debated at Milwaukee about whether or not deacons are going to count as lay people or as clergy. That's going to be part of the conversation. Currently, deacons that are rostered count as lay people, all right? So they go toward that 60%. So if we just do what this says, we will be able to accommodate our current requirement of 60-40. We're going to be able to make that work because most of the time, as you can see, we're above that 60-40. We're closer to probably 70% almost. Is that clear? We have a question or a comment, and microphone 2.
Yes, Pastor Hans
Can you tell us who you are?
Pastor Hans Sackerson, Clear Lake, South Dakota.
Thank you.
Just wondering, on that said before the first business meeting, I'm interpreting that as all the retired clergy that get together here would then elect 10% of their number to be. Is that like if 40 retired clergy come to this meeting, then you can have 4 representatives? Or is that if there's 130 retired clergy, you can have up to 13 retired members? You understand the question I'm asking?
I don't know.
Oh.
That would be something I think would have to be worked out. It is just simply not saying, I think there would be a need for the new bishop to find out what other synods are currently doing. What? Is it just the total? All right, I'm wrong again. I love that. Okay, I can answer the question. It's just 10% of the retired. So yes, if there's 140 retired pastors, it would be 14.
Thank you.
Okay. Microphone 2.
Jim Weir, Trinity Lutheran Church in Yankton. Is there a formal group of retired pastors or organization, or is it just?
Well, they are on the roster and they are scattered. We don't make them all live in the same community.
Understood.
And there currently is no mechanism whatsoever for, I mean, I visit them, but I do so in 3 or 4 different meetings across the state. But there's not a place or a time where all of them would come together for an event currently.
Okay, thank you.
Microphone 3.
Phil Hogan from Atonement Lutheran in Rapid City. I don't know what the current practice is of who pays travel expenses for the folks in this category. And if we adopt this resolution, will that change in any way?
If we follow our current practice, I would say that whoever is elected would be able to request reimbursement for travel at the going rate. That would, I mean, we have policy in place for people that are coming. If they're coming then as one of those representatives representing the retired pastors, I would think that they would be able to ask for reimbursement. Yeah. Microphone 2.
Scott Parsley, St. John Lutheran, Madison, South Dakota. As I read the resolution, it seems that the retired pastors can have an opportunity to be one of the 14, or they can be, if they don't succeed, if for some reason they aren't elected there and they were interested, then they could come as a lay member of the congregation. So it just seems to me, and maybe I'm looking at this wrong, that puts that group in a special category. Today our pastors come as pastors, our lay come as lays, one way or the other. We don't have opportunity to go 2 bites at the apple, so to speak. Not that I think this is a huge deal, but just in terms of consistency with how we elect our people to come here, I'm just curious about that, if you would speak to that.
I don't know that there was actually a question in there, Scott. I mean, there might have been.
The question is, am I reading that correctly?
Well, the current practice is the only way they can come is they can register as a retired pastor of the church, which means they come with voice. They cannot vote. If they want to vote, they either need to be under contract doing an interim, which we have people here right now that are doing that. And so they have the vote because they're under contract with the congregation doing an interim call. If they also then want to come as a voting member, their congregation can choose to elect them at the annual meeting and send them as a layperson. That would be up to that local community where they're a member. As to whether or not they're getting 2 bites at the apple, I would take that up with their local congregation.
Thank you.
Okay. Microphone 3.
Hi, I'm Wyon Leonard from Our Saviors in Hermosa. And even though I'm holding a red card, it's not that I object to any retired pastor having the vote. My concern is almost what I think Scott was alluding to, that it would be an unfair proportion. I understand the 60-40 rule, but my concern is with 10%. Our congregation's number of lay members, whether they be retired pastors or not, are not 10% of our membership or of our baptized members. And so I think kind of what he was saying, I'm concerned about the disproportionate percentage that it would allow.
Thank you. To just clarify, I believe the retired roster right now for South Dakota is somewhere in the 130 category. So it would be approximately 13 that would be eligible to come. So again, microphone 1.
Do I need to introduce myself?
Can you say who you are again? I could not.
Brian Timperley, Lutheran Church of Del Rapids.
Okay.
My question is just trying to get more information. So the retired rostered members, would they decide which 10% would participate in the Synod Assembly before or after congregations choose their delegates that are lay people? Or is there any plan for how to make that happen? Or, because I mean,
I think we need to get the new bishop up here. Certainly, let me just arbitrarily decide how that's going to be done. We have no mechanism currently for the retired pastors to caucus. they would have to figure out how they would like to get that done. I mean, true, I'm not being funny right now, but I can't answer your question because we don't have that mechanism in place. There simply is not a process. We do have a process in place for how people are selected across the synod, both lay and pastors, for being voting members at this assembly. This is making a provision without direction of how it should be accomplished to allow somewhere between 13 or 14 individuals who are retired to come and have voice and vote, being representative, and it would still have to fit inside the 60-40 requirement. That's not being changed. We're not going 55-45. So 60% of this assembly will continue to need to be lay people. I believe microphone 2. All right, I'll go with that. Microphone 2.
My name is John Jorgensen from Bergen Lutheran Church. My wife is currently a retired minister with the ELCA here in South Dakota, but she does supply. Now, can she be elected from our congregation to represent us as a layperson?
Yes, but only where she has her membership.
Her membership is at Bergen Lutheran.
Okay. Bergen Lutheran could elect her at their annual meeting to be a lay voting member from Bergen.
Even though she does supply there?
Even though she does supply.
Thank you.
That one I could answer. Microphone 3.
Pam Power from Custer Lutheran Fellowship in Custer. I just have a question. So if at the churchwide assembly they just vote and decide that deacons would be counted as on the clergy roster for voting purposes, then that would count against our 40%, right? So if we add the 10% of retired pastors and we hit that 40%, I mean, is there a potential that I'll be told, I'm sorry, I know you're a called pastor at Custer Lutheran Fellowship, but we're over our percentage and you can't come now? How will that work?
Well, this is me taking a wild guess, which I'm happy to do.
Thank you, Bishop.
I think it would need to be discerned by the Synod Council after the churchwide assembly, depending on what we do right now, what happens in Milwaukee at the August retreat, to start having that conversation, one, with the new bishop, with the new Synod Council. How are we going to move forward? What do the numbers actually look like? Are we going to create, first of all, a process for retired pastors to caucus? That needs to be created by someone. Secondly, then, what does it actually look like for the numbers? And what are we going to do in response to that? Okay?
Thank you.
Did that sound like I was ducking? No, I wasn't. Microphone 2, and then we'll go to microphone 3.
Pastor Alois Vogel, Great Plains Parish in Ballot and Hosmer. I want to start first by saying I do value our retired pastors a lot. The question for me at hand is, what is the status of a retired pastor, somebody who is on the roster? As soon as I go into retirement, my call officially ends. I've served, or as some people on council always say, I served my time and now I'm out. I do understand that there is a passion for continuing the service and the worship and all of these things, but if the call process is not there, why should a retired pastor who's not on the call be still considered as a pastor in our synod and not as a lay voting member as other people and our deacons are right now, and they're worshiping together with us as well. I don't see why retired pastors should have this extraordinary privilege of still being on the same level as pastors who fill out a call with the status of being retired.
Thank you. We're going to need the timer up, Sawyer, a 90-second timer.
Wilbur Holtz, Trinity
2
Lutheran
minutes,
Rapid
excuse-
City.
Wait a minute.
Sorry.
Microphone 3.
I'll be brief. Wilbur Holtz, Trinity Lutheran Rapid City. I moved the previous question.
All right. Question has been moved. Is there a second? We need to move directly to the vote on whether or not to end debate. You're not voting on the resolution 6A. You're voting on whether or not we're going to stop talking about 6A. Are you ready to vote on the motion to end debate? Yes? Vote 1 if you want to end debate. Vote 2 if you would like to continue talking about 6A. Please vote now. Again, you should have a green flashing light if the vote goes through. Any difficulty? Seeing none, please close the vote, please, and display the results. Pretty doggone clear about that. We move then immediately to voting on 6A. Do you understand what you're voting on? I need a good solid yes here. Yes. Thank you. All those in adopting 6A, please vote 1. Those that are opposed to 6A, please vote 2. Please vote now. Well, I moved too quickly. Yep. And just as a reminder, this needs 2/3 to pass. 6A is a requirement of 2/3 vote. Are we ready? We are ready. If you approve of 6A, please vote 1 or A. If you disapprove, please vote B or 2. Please vote now. Are we good? We have a voting problem out in the middle. 2 more over there. Can you try to hold them up and vote again, please? Let's do this. Let's close the vote and display the results. If we're anywhere near close. Well, let me take the, well, let's, no, I don't want to do it that way. Let me see if you're okay with people's voting devices not getting counted. Let me ask those folks first. If you have not had your vote count, do you want us to, I'm serious now. Do you want us to wait until you can vote, or should we move to a different voting methodology? Please, I'm asking the ones that's not working. Let's do this. Let's try a voice vote. No, let's try a voice vote. No. I know we're not close, but I don't want the people out there that didn't get to vote feel bad. Are you okay? My parliamentarian says I can move forward, that we're not even close to the 2/3 requirement. Let me just test the will of the body. Are you willing to move forward with the results that we have? Yes. All right. Resolution 6A has been defeated. Please, if you had an issue with your voting device, please move to the back of the room and see either Sawyer, what? Okay. All right, what we're finding out is that some of you are pushing the channel button first. That resets the voting device, and it has to go find the server again. So when we get to voting, just push the number, and it wakes up. It will wake up and vote. Oh. Okie dokie then, folks. And if it makes all the retired pastors feel better, for years, decades actually, I've been trying to get the South Dakota legislature to provide an ongoing annual elk tag for the Bishop of South Dakota, and I have not even found anyone to carry the bill. So, microphone 3.
Just a point of order. Didn't somebody tell us to push the channel button yesterday?
Initially to wake them up, yes,
Okay, so
but not now.
but not anymore.
Right.
Okay, cleared.
Thank you. Sure. And I used to like you, Jonathan. All right. Let's see here. I believe we're about ready to go. Nope. I need to have Lene Sorensen. Please come forward, Pastor Lene Sorensen.
Thank you, Bishop, Carla, members of the Assembly. I'm given these few minutes to remind you that in 2020 we will celebrate the 50th anniversary of the ordination of women. Una gran fiesta para honrar a las mujeres en el ministerio. Across the United States, synods will be commemorating the anniversary under the theme, "We are church, we are called," proclaiming, reforming, celebrating. As a growing and evolving church, we continue to remove human-made barriers that stifle the message of Jesus' good news. La justicia está en el centro del llamado de Jesús al ministerio. We have a South Dakota Synod Committee planning events for the celebration. As the year progresses, look for Bible studies, video clips, and so much more. But I want to take this opportunity to tell you about a project that we are hoping you will take up to honor the anniversary. Estamos unidos con la estola de la ordenación. Each congregation is invited to create a stole for their church to use to lift up shared ministry. El ministerio compartido son mujeres y hombres trabajando juntos. These stoles, which can be quilted, embroidered, or knitted even, will hopefully be on display at both the 2020 conventions and at next year's assembly. You can pick up a flyer about the stoles at the Women of the ELCA table in the display area. But honestly, it's simple. Ask your pastor to borrow a stole and make a pattern, and turn on your creativity. While we celebrate a specific anniversary, we truly celebrate shared ministry and an ever-evolving church that is the Evangelical Lutheran Church in America. Gracias y que Dios te bendiga.
We are ready to go to lunch. Please do not leave. We are not done with our work. There will be a 5th ballot when we return. As far as I know, there will be no additional speaking. There will be prayer and time for prayerful discernment, and certainly that should continue during the lunch break. And please come back ready to work at 2 p.m. I'm going to call upon our chaplain, Bishop Eitram, to pray us into lunch.
I still don't have a prayer. But I think again we shall sing, and let's may strengthen for thy service be. Why don't you stand? Be present at our table, Lord.
Have fun at lunch. See you back at 2.